Hi, my name's Tyron, and today I'm going to be explaining my topic on colorism's impact on the world because it's a global practice. And I'm here with Adiana Verduzco and Timmy Shepard. My topic was, I got my topic from the book I was reading for English, which was called Children of Blood and Bone. And there was in the story there was a monarchy, and the nobles and the king, which was named King Saron, they had a lighter complexion than the peasants. They would call the diviners, which were the sons and daughters of the magi, which were they were made of magic. But since the King Saron, which the monarchy didn't like magic, they invaded the magi and just left the diviners, which the diviners had a darker complexion. So the monarchy had a lighter complexion, and the diviners, which were classified as the peasants, which were excruciatingly and physically and mentally were criticized and just persecuted their whole lives. So that's where I got the topic of colorism. I think that colorism concerns me because it's one of the internal complications within the people of color community. It impacts everyone, no matter how light or dark one is, although it can be differentiated into being mentally and emotionally destructive or being beneficial to a person that is a person of color. I have witnessed colorism between people at school, the media, TV shows, and movies, and I have seen the emotional damage it can cause. Conversations about colorism are crucial as a person's skin color still and always has determined how they are perceived. It is a social hierarchy that is causing tremendous destruction and anguish and will continue to be until we as a society come together and educate ourselves on what colorism is and the detrimental significance it holds. One of the sources I was analyzing was David Knight's article that the title is called "What is Colorism?", which will answer the question that I have of what actually colorism is. He is a teacher in Boston. David Knight is a teacher in Boston that is interested in helping teachers and or educators and recognize the colorism within school and encourage them to hold discussions regarding it in the classroom. He said some of the topics, the key ideas that he has in his article is many diverse ethnicities actively engage in everyday forms of skin color bias. He elaborates on how colorism is a global practice. He elaborates on colorism. He explains how colorism interferes with perceptions and interactions between people of different skin colors. And he also explains why educators should care about colorism and what they should do when contributing to dilute colorism in today's society. He quotes, "Almost daily, I witnessed high school students identify, categorize, and stereotype their peers based on skin tone." He also quotes that emerging through European and colonial and imperial history, colorism is prevalent in countries as distant as Brazil and India. He also says color-conscious banter between students reflects unconscious and unspoken biases, otherwise called implicit biases that favor lighter skin. Another source that I analyzed was Lori Tharp's article, "The Difference Between Colorism and Racism," which answers the question of how racism and colorism are differentiated. And she is also the author of Same Family in Different Colors. Her key ideas that she states in her article is skin color matters because we are perceived based on our physical appearance. She elaborates on how conversation regarding race are less adequate as the multiracial community expands in America. She explains how colorism is built on the principles of racism, and she explains the word colorism does not fully exist because it's not in the dictionary, and the word was made up by a woman that elaborated on the definition of colorism. She explains why colorism is not just within the Black community, and she states that statistics, and she elaborates on the statistics regarding the systematic prejudice of skin color. She quotes that it cannot be overstated that if racism didn't exist, a discussion about varying skin hues would simply be a conversation about aesthetics. She says a person's skin color is an irrefutable visual fact that is impossible to hide, whereas race is a constructed, quasi-scientific classification that is often only visible on a government form. She also says that colorism is a societal ill felt in many places all around the world, including Latin America, East and Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, and Africa. My final observations of these two sources is colorism is a global practice and is widespread in countries like Brazil and India. Colorism affects people's perception interactions with one another. People of the same ethnicity like Mexican and Puerto Rico face different expectations, different realities, and sometimes different systematic outcomes solely based on their skin color. Studies have shown that white children attribute positive traits to lighter skin and black children. And while black children also show some racial bias towards whiteness, white children in particular hold on to these prejudices more strongly as they grow older. Colorism is built on the principles of racism, giving the reasoning behind the perception of black being demonized and white representing good. And lighter-skinned people, no matter what ethnicity, benefit systematically, while dark-skinned people are left suffering systematically as well. This is my favorite source that I've analyzed, and it's a YouTuber named T. Noor, and her title is "It's Not a Coincidence, It's Colorism." She talks about ever-popular topic of colorism and its oppressive nature. There's a lot of different perspectives in this video. She elaborates on what colorism actually is and who it oppresses. She talks about blatant denial of colorism in some of today's society. She explains the dehumanization and the defeminization of black women in today's society socially. She explains examples of colorism in the media. She also talks about the preference debate. She quotes, "Colorism is a practice of discrimination by which those with lighter skin are treated more favorably than those with darker skin. This practice is a product to racism in the United States in that it upholds the white standards of beauty and benefits white people in the institutions of oppression." Although she says colorism is not exclusive to not just the United States, it's a global issue. She continues to quote, "Colorism is the child of racism." She says darker complected people have the narrative that they are less desirable, less trustworthy, and overall less deserving of respect. She says the bias of colorism, specifically for dark-skinned women, very often involves dehumanization and defeminization. For example, comparing dark-skinned women to a Rottweiler is not only dehumanizing because you're comparing dark-skinned women to a dog, but defeminizing because that specific breed is known to be aggressive and violent. She says things don't need to happen to you for them to be real, which is referencing the key topic of how colorism shows ignorant people that are on the topic of colorism show blatant ignorance because they think that just because they haven't experienced colorism doesn't mean it happens, but it happens. Which brings me back to why things don't need to happen to you for them to be real. She also explains an example of how colorism is in the media, and she asked, "Who are the most famous Basketball Wives cast member?" And then she asked, "What are they famous for?" She shows a video of light-skinned women fighting each other. Then she says, Then she asked, which Basketball Wives cast member was asked to sit down in a separate room during the reunion, although all she ever did was push someone. Then she shows a dark-skinned woman smiling. My fourth source is how colorism is different in different parts of the world, and this particular perception is on just as the Philippines. Bianca Ponzalin is a senior at Moro Catholic High School. She shares her story on how skin lightening emotionally and physically damaged her, as well as sharing the origins of colonial ideas regarding skin colors in the TED Talk YouTube video, Colorism in the Philippines. She hopes to further her advocacy and raise awareness of the effects of colorism, particularly how it affects women in the Philippines into her college years. She explains her own experience of coming across skin bleaching lotion in the Philippines and how it made her question why skin bleaching is even a thing. She explains why skin lightening is prevalent in Southeast Asia, particularly the Philippines. She elaborates on how she began to feel insecure in her own skin because of the verbal abuse from her family, in which she took action in trying everything to lighten her skin. She comes to a realization that her skin is beautiful and should be embraced. And then she elaborates on how to help people recognize that their dark skin is beautiful. She quotes, "I came across an aisle in a drugstore with an utter abundance amount of lotion. Upon closer look, the lotion was for skin lightening. I wondered why anyone would ever want to strip their skin of their pigment." She continues to quote, "The Philippines has a long history of colonization where native Filipinos were forced to relinquish their beliefs in favor of Eurocentric ones. A class system was developed in which your skin color was a factor, i.e. the lighter your skin was, your status was too." And she says that she's proud to say that now she can look at a fair-skinned woman that she once envied and not feel any ounce of jealousy. She can look in the mirror and appreciate her skin for what it is. She says, for one thing, just being more careful with the things you say goes a long way. And she says, second, support dark skin and brown skin Southeast Asians. This is quoting back to the key topic on explaining how to get rid of colorism, or how to help people recognize that their skin is beautiful and they should embrace it. She finally quotes, "Finally, never stop fighting colorism because it's a global issue. It doesn't just affect Filipino people. Colorism affects people all over Asia, the Latino community, indigenous people, and especially affects people of African descent." My final observations for the last two sources is colorism is a worldwide issue. Colorism is built from racism. Dark-skinned women endure more backlash and have more harming stereotypes socially. I observed that just because you have not experienced something does not mean it didn't happen. Hyperfemininity and hypersexuality counterbalances the bias that many have against dark-skinned women. Words, no matter how serious they are, can have a huge impact on one's mental state. And I think we should advocate for dark-skinned and brown-skinned women. The titles of my sources from my research are The Difference Between Racism and Colorism, What Colorism Actually Is, It's Not a Coincidence, It's Colorism, and Colorism in the Philippines. 4 different sources that I've used for my research. My name's Tyron Clay, and this is my topic on colorism. I hope I've elaborated different perspectives and taught you something about colorism and how it impacts society, and also hope to spark something in you to start making a difference in the world. Thank you. Bye.